Imagine a world where pizza has no sauce, where pasta is served pale and plain, and the BLT simply doesn't exist. Imagine Italian cuisine stripped of its iconic, vibrant red. For a long time, in many parts of Europe, this was the reality. And it was all because a surprising number of people were suspicious, and in some cases, downright terrified of this, the tomato. For about 200 years, a sinister reputation clung to this vibrant fruit. Many didn't see it as food, they viewed it with deep suspicion. It was whispered about in the same breath as deadly poisons. It was even given dramatic, fearful nicknames like the poison apple, a beautiful but deadly object straight out of a dark fairy tale. But was the tomato really a killer? Or was it the innocent victim of a historical misunderstanding, a centuries-long mystery fueled by bizarre deaths, superstition, and scientific blunders? Today, we unearth the bizarre history of the Great Tomato Scare. Our story begins not in the sun-drenched fields of Tuscany, but thousands of miles away in the mountainous regions of western South America. Here, wild ancestors of the tomato grew, small and berry-like. It was in Mesoamerica, under the care of the Aztec civilization, that the tomato was first truly cultivated and cherished. They called it tomatal, meaning the swelling fruit, and for them it was a staple, often mixed with chilies and seeds in a kind of proto-salsa. It was just food, pure and simple. Then, in the early 16th century, the world changed. Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Americas, kicking off the massive biological and cultural swap known as the Columbian Exchange. Amidst the maize, potatoes, and chilies, they found the tomato. But the Spanish didn't immediately see it as dinner. They saw it as a curiosity, a botanical trophy. Imagine encountering these sprawling, leafy vines with their shockingly bright, glossy orbs of red and yellow. In a European world of greens and browns, the tomato was an explosion of color. It was exotic, beautiful, and therefore deeply strange. So it was packed up not for the ship's cook, but for the gardens of aristocrats and the collections of botanists. The tomato arrived in Europe as an ornamental plant, a living jewel to be displayed in the exclusive gardens of the wealthy. The tomato first landed in Spain, and from there made its way to Italy. One of the first documented appearances in Italian records comes from 1544, when the physician and botanist Pietro Andrea Mattioli described the plant. He compared this new golden apple to another fruit he knew, the mandrake. With that one seemingly innocent comparison, he had unknowingly placed the tomato into a family of botanical assassins, setting the stage for centuries of fear. To understand the fear, you have to understand the family the tomato had just been sorted into, Solanaceae, better known as the nightshades. For a European in the 16th century, that name alone could send a shiver down the spine. This wasn't just any plant family. It was a lineup of Europe's most notorious botanical criminals. The most infamous member was, and still is, Atropa belladonna, deadly nightshade. Its reputation was legendary. The plant's small, shiny black berries looked deceptively sweet, but consuming even a few could be a death sentence. The poison, atropine, causes delirium, paralysis, and ultimately death. Its name, belladonna, or beautiful lady in Italian, came from the risky practice of women using its drops to dilate their pupils for cosmetic effect. Then there was mandrake, a plant steeped in supernatural superstition. Its fleshy root often resembled a twisted human figure, and folklore claimed it let out a fatal scream when pulled from the ground. It also contained potent hallucinogenic alkaloids, making it a feared component in both medicine and occult practices. Add in henbane, another foul-smelling cousin known for causing wild hallucinations, and you have a truly fearsome family. Now, into this gallery of rogues enters our hero, the tomato.
Imagine you're a 16th century botanist like Mattioli. You don't have genetic testing. Your primary tools are observation and comparison. You look at this new plant's leaves, its vine-like growth, and the shape of its flowers, and you see an unnerving resemblance to the nightshades you already know and fear. The structure of the tomato flower is strikingly similar to that of deadly nightshade. The crushed leaves give off a pungent scent that many found unpleasant and associated with toxicity. So, when early botanists classified the tomato, they weren't just being superstitious, they were using the science of their time. It looked like a nightshade, it was structured like a nightshade, so it stood to reason that it might share the same dangerous properties, guilt by association. This wasn't a unified scientific verdict across Europe. Some writers noted it was eaten, but for many, especially in Northern Europe, the experts had inadvertently labeled the tomato a potential threat.
With scientific suspicion already planted, it didn't take long for fear of the tomato to seep into the fertile ground of European folklore. The 16th and 17th centuries were a time of intense anxiety about the supernatural, and the lines between botany, medicine, and magic were dangerously blurred. Its name didn't help. Later, botanists would give it the Latin name Lycopersicon esculentum. Esculentum simply means edible, but Lycopersicon translates to wolf peach. While this was a scholarly term not used by the average person, it reflects the deep-seated suspicions surrounding the plant. In German folklore, the wolf was a symbol of savagery and danger. Tying a fruit to such a creature, even in Latin, certainly didn't help its public image. This wariness was amplified by the tomato's connection to the nightshade family, which was already deeply entangled with the lore of witchcraft. Witches were believed to concoct magical flying ointments, and the recipes, often extracted under torture, almost always listed powerful psychoactive plants, deadly nightshade, mandrake, and henbane. These plants contained alkaloids that could induce powerful hallucinations and a sensation of flying. To the people of the time, nightshades were the key to unholy power. Now, consider the tomato's position. It arrives in Europe and is identified as a new member of this exact plant family. While there's no solid evidence that people thought the tomato itself was a specific ingredient in flying ointments or a tool for witchcraft, its family ties were damning enough. In the paranoid mindset of the era, anything associated with this family was suspect. The tomato wasn't just seen as passively poisonous anymore. It was viewed as an agent of ill repute, a beautiful but treacherous newcomer who kept very bad company. As Europe moved into the 18th century, the fear of the tomato evolved. It shifted from the supernatural to the medical, but it felt even more real. The tomato acquired its most famous nickname, the poison apple. This wasn't just a folk tale anymore. People believed they were seeing hard proof. Wealthy people would eat tomatoes and then fall ill. Some even died. The scene of the crime, according to a leading theory from historians, was the lavish dining table of the European aristocracy. The tomato, still mostly an ornamental novelty, was making its way into the kitchens of the very rich. A nobleman might serve a dish with tomatoes to show off his worldliness. But then a disturbing pattern seemed to emerge. An aristocrat would eat a meal containing these poison apples and later be struck by a mysterious illness, severe stomach pains, confusion, and sometimes death. Doctors investigating what new or strange thing the person had eaten pointed the finger at the tomato. The conclusion seemed obvious. The poison apple was a killer. But it was all a tragic misunderstanding. The tomato was innocent. The real culprit may have been hiding in plain sight. The true villain, this theory suggests, was lead. You see, the European aristocracy of the 17th and 18th centuries ate off plates made of pewter. Pewter was a status symbol, but high-quality pewter also contained a significant amount of lead to make it heavier and more lustrous. Here's the fatal chemistry. Tomatoes are highly acidic.
When a sliced acidic tomato was placed on a high lead pewter plate, the acid could leach lead directly out of the alloy. The unsuspecting aristocrat would then eat the tomato and with it consume a dose of lead, a potent neurotoxin. The symptoms of lead poisoning perfectly matched the poison apple being reported: severe abdominal pain, cognitive impairment, and weakness. The wealthy were in effect poisoning themselves with their own expensive tableware, and the tomato was taking all the blame. This theory also explains a crucial clue. This mysterious illness seemed to be a disease of the rich. The lower classes weren't getting sick. Why? Because they ate from simple wooden bowls or lead-free pottery. If they ate a tomato, nothing happened. The acid had no lead to react with. The tomato was condemned, its reputation sealed by the very plates it was served upon.
For centuries, the tomato was a pariah. But slowly, the tide began to turn. The liberation of the tomato wasn't one single event, but a gradual revolution happening in the kitchens of the poor, on bustling city streets, and in dramatic public displays. The first cracks in the wall of fear appeared in Italy, not in the grand dining halls, but in the crowded, impoverished city of Naples. By the late 18th century, the working poor needed food that was cheap and easy to eat. Street vendors sold simple flatbreads, and at some point, someone had the ingenious idea to top them with this cheap, plentiful, and still suspicious fruit. They were likely using tomatoes because they were easy to grow and ignored by the upper classes. They crushed them, spread them on the flatbread, and created the earliest form of pizza. This was the mass experiment the tomato needed. Thousands of Naples' poorest citizens were eating tomatoes daily, and they weren't dying. They were eating their simple meals off scraps of paper or from their hands, no pewter plates in sight. While the rich whispered of the poison apple, the poor were turning it into a culinary icon. The first Italian cookbook to feature a tomato sauce recipe, Antonio Latini's Lo Scalco alla Moderna, the modern steward, had appeared between 1692 and 1694, but it was on the streets of Naples that the tomato truly began its redemption. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the fear had traveled with European colonists. But this is where our story gets its most cinematic moment. Legend has it that a gentleman farmer from Salem, New Jersey, named Colonel Robert Gibbon Johnson, decided to shatter the prejudice. As the story goes, on a summer day in 1820, Johnson stood on the steps of the local courthouse with a basket of tomatoes. A crowd supposedly gathered, expecting to watch him commit public suicide. With the crowd watching in horror, Johnson raised a tomato to his lips and took a bite. Then another. He proceeded to eat the whole basket. The crowd waited for him to collapse, but nothing happened. He stood there, perfectly healthy. Now, while historians have struggled to find any contemporary accounts of this event, the power of the legend is undeniable. It symbolizes the moment when direct evidence finally began to triumph over superstition. At the same time, science was finally catching up. In the 19th century, with better methods of chemical analysis, scientists could finally distinguish the tomato from its toxic cousins, confirming it contained no deadly alkaloids. The scientific case that had started the fear was crumbling under the weight of better science. The 19th century was the tomato's coming out party. With its name slowly being cleared, the fruit exploded in popularity. The charge was led by the Italians. The unification of Italy in the mid-19th century helped spread the Neapolitan love for tomatoes throughout the country. A popular legend credits the invention of the pizza margherita to a Neapolitan pizza maker in 1889, with its red tomato, white mozzarella, and green basil mimicking the new Italian flag, cementing the tomato as a national symbol. Italian immigrants then carried their love for the tomato across the globe, especially to America, where their tomato-based dishes would change the way a nation eats. Can you even imagine Italian food without tomatoes today? It's almost impossible.
The tomato's integration is so complete that many people are shocked to learn it's not even native to Europe. Its journey from poison ornamental to the heart of Italian cooking is one of the most remarkable transformations in food history. In America, stories like the one about Colonel Robert Johnson, combined with the influence of Italian immigrants, helped the tomato's popularity soar. Entrepreneurs like Joseph Campbell saw its potential, and in 1897, his company launched its iconic condensed tomato soup, making the fruit a convenient pantry staple. Breeders developed hundreds of new varieties: big beefsteaks for slicing, dense Romas for sauce, and sweet cherry tomatoes for snacking. The tomato had completed its journey. It traveled from the Andes as a curiosity, was branded a cousin to killers, and spent centuries as a feared poison apple. And then, through the ingenuity of the poor, bold public acts, and the slow march of science, it was redeemed. Today, the tomato is one of the most widely consumed and beloved crops on the planet. So why was the tomato feared in much of Europe for so long? It was a perfect storm of bad luck and misinformation. It was a victim of its family tree, arriving in a Europe justifiably terrified of its nightshade cousins. It was a casualty of timing, landing on a continent gripped by paranoia, where its relatives were associated with dark lore. And, most tragically, it was quite possibly framed by the very dinnerware of the aristocracy. The story of the poison apple is more than just a quirky piece of food history. It's a powerful reminder of how easily suspicion and misinformation can take root, and how long a bad reputation can persist, even when the truth is right in front of us. The humble tomato wasn't a killer. It was simply a victim, waiting patiently for society to see it for what it was: delicious, versatile, and completely innocent. The journey from poison to pizza was a long one, but its ultimate triumph is a testament to its undeniable appeal.